I was born in Louisiana, New Orleans, and I was raised in California. Well, on one of the visits that I went to in this small little country town where my people live, it was a Sunday, and my mother and me were going to church. And I'll just suffice it to say that when I saw the signs, it changed my mind. Mm-hmm. When I saw the signs, white entrance only, colored entrance only, it changed my mind. It just changed my direction. And I could not believe what I was seeing. My mother and father had not prepped me for that, and it just shook me. It just shook me. And ever since then, I've been on this path of African consciousness, trying to find out why this difference, why this racism, what is this thing that we're all suffering from. So, after all these many years, and I'm 69, I don't have no problem telling my age. After all these years, and that was 61 years ago, I find myself in front of you. And I know that sometimes when you get information, it's like old news, sometimes it's new news. But just know that the news that I bring you tonight is the truth. I mean it with the, how would we say, the biggest amount of empathy and sympathy and kindness. But you know, sometimes the truth kicks us in the butt, does it not? Yeah. Sometimes it shakes you up. It should, yeah. But you know, I don't mean to, you know, shake you out of your comfort zone, but just kind of shake you up a little bit, okay? So please just, you know, hold on to your hat, fasten your seatbelt, and hold on tight, because some of you might be on a little bit of a ride. At any rate, I want to dedicate this time that we're sharing here to all the men and women and children who we call ancestors, who will not ever know this truth, who suffered and sacrificed, died without ever knowing this truth. And it breaks my heart that we have lost so many millions of our people without ever having known our truth. So it's in honor of them, and also Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. I can't tell you how much of the difference in my life that woman has made. And you know, my voice gets kind of shaky because I'm very passionate about this. But she made such a huge difference in my life as far as our contributions and what we have given to civilization. We have not been given the full story of our contributions, significant and magnificent as they are. So when you see these slides and you kind of doubt that they're truthful or where in the world did you get that, I really had to dig and read a whole lot of books. I didn't get anything from PBS, I didn't get anything from Wikipedia, you know, National Geographic or nothing like that. I read a whole lot of books, and I've been reading books for years. So it's something that you have to do the work to get it done, and it's not easy. And just remember that Wikipedia and all those things that you can find on the web are manipulated. You will learn about the things that you never knew so you can become the person you were meant to be. And a lot of people say, why should I study African history? What's it to me? Who cares? All that kind of stuff. And the first thing that you should know is because we are all Africans. We were called savages. In the 1700s, natives, blackamoors, Garamantes, Moors, and in the 1800s, we were called niggers and coons. We were called spooks and boys. We were called colored people and jigaboos. We were called Negroes, brothers, and blacks. But in the 1990s, we got it half right. We were called African Americans. So, but we failed always to claim the name that we really have as an ancestral home, which is Africans. Every other ethnic group in the world has a country of origin that they associate with. And we have been taught to hate ourselves and to hate Africa. So that is the first thing that we have to resolve within ourselves, is to not resist and detest Africa or darkness, and to accept who we are. Okay, that's my first thing. And because in spite of what you believe or have been taught, your story did not start with slavery. Because you have a rich and wonderful legacy that has been stolen from us. because you have been left out of the history that is being taught in their schools, through their textbooks, and in their stories. Okay? So, remember, because history is not our story. It's his story. And for matters of simplicity, I will call white people, not Peckawas, not rednecks, I will call them European Caucasoids. Okay? Okay, so that's what I'm going to call them. Okay? So just to be nice. Okay, so the first, I mean, just to be nice, because if there were white people in here, I would explain it the same way. Okay? So what we learned today is basically about time and how time can be manipulated by people who are trying to establish themselves on a timeline where they don't even belong. Okay? So we are now in the year 2016 AD, which means Anno Domini, which is the year of the Lord. That is over 2016 years after the year 1. Everybody ready with me? Right. Okay, and we don't talk about those years in reflection to us except when we were enslaved. We were not slaves, we were enslaved. There's a difference, okay? Because when they took us from the motherland, we were not slaves. We had culture, we had tradition, we had customs, we had food, we had songs, we had dances. But when we were enslaved, they took all that away from us, okay? But your African story goes back at least 30,000 years BC, and that's where our history is in the BC time period, okay? So just kind of keep that. Now, with this timeline, I want you guys to, I want you to pay more attention to the white boxes at the top. The white boxes at the top, as you notice, and a little bit right of center is 1 AD, okay? 1 AD is when the European Caucasoids inserted themselves on the timeline. All this time behind the timeline, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 10,000, 15,000, 30,000, there were no white people on the timeline. Never. No white people, okay? So when you're understanding the concept of BC time period, you're going from 0 higher. Okay, so you're starting at 0 or 1, and you're going up. Does everybody see that? Yes. Okay, so it goes from 1, 2, 3, 5, 10,000, 20,000, all like that. And then when the Europeans inserted themselves on the timeline, when they arbitrarily came up with Jesus Christ, okay, they started him here. And that's when they inserted themselves on the timeline. They did not even exist on the timeline of Earth's story until 1000 to 800 BC. That's when they came down out of the northern hemisphere from their caves, when they were heathens and barbarians, vandals, burglars. They were chaotic, they were cavemen, they were out of control, okay? And they did not show up on the scene until 800, I give them grace, to 1000 BC. All this is us. All this is us, okay? And here we are over here at 2000. So you see, their history is very finite. Their history is very short. Ancient civilizations had to have had a civilization for 3,000 years before they're considered ancient. Do we consider ourselves having ancient history? No, but should we?
Yes.
Yes, we should. And do they have an ancient civilization? No. They're brand new on the block. Brand new on the block. So BC stands for before Christ, or before his era, before Christ's era.
Common era, right?
But before the common era, before Jews.
They changed it to common.
They arbitrarily changed the terms. They changed the terms as far as laws. They changed the terms as far as what they call things. Just anything to put them on top. Okay? Okay? So anyway, you can say BC is before Christ, before the coming era, before Christ's era, whatever way you want to say it. But it was before Christ was on the scene. And he was supposedly a white man. Hold tight, hold tight, hold tight, hold tight. Okay, so anyway, there was nothing but black Africans on earth here in this time period. Nothing but black Africans. And then all of a sudden, you see Jesus Christ just pop up. Just pop up, okay? And he came along between 7 and 4 BC, just before this time change, okay? And he was killed in about 26 AD. So his lifespan was extremely short. And then that's when they inserted themselves, okay? So AD means Anno Domini, right? And it means after the coming era or after Christ's era, whichever way you want to say it. Now, what caused the change? It was European Caucasoids, period. And how many years did civilization exist in the BC time period? I'll just go back to 200,000 years BC. That's when they found the first Homo sapiens sapien like us, okay? There were many, of our ancestors, hundreds of thousands, millions of years ago, but as far as what we look like now, that came along around 200,000 BC on the African continent. On the African continent, no place else, okay? That's where we started. That's where man started, the human being. And it wasn't the size of me. Actually, they were little bitty tiny people, maybe around 4 feet tall. And they were really built, and they were very energetic, very muscular people. And the European Caucasoid calls them pygmies. Erroneous name. They just call it a different name. But these people were seafarers. They were magnificent specimens of people. Okay? So whose story is in the BC time period, and why don't they talk about it? Anybody? Anybody? Okay. Whose story? It's our story. And why don't they talk about it? Because it's our story, and it would expose them. That's right. So, exactly. So, what you learn today will surprise you, and what we have to learn about is revisionist history. Does anybody know what to revise means? When you revise something, what does it mean? You go back and change it. So we're experiencing, it, at this particular juncture right now, we're experiencing a revisionist history, and we just don't even know it, okay? But anyway, a lot of people would like you to believe, as they picture us in Africa, we're poor, we're in shacks, we're in grass skirts, we have bones through our nose, we're stirring people in pots, all kinds of crazy stuff. But that is because they want to show African blacks, black Africans, in a inferior position.
That's right.
Always inferior. So that's what revisionist history is. It's always to put them, European Caucasoids, in a dominant position, and always black Africans in an inferior position. Okay, that is absolutely it. Okay, so I just can't tell you how brilliant we are, and we've been that way for hundreds of thousands of years. I just want you to know that, really, seriously. So for the young children in the room, don't ever let anybody tell you what you can't do. Don't let anybody ever tell you you can't do something. You set your mind on that, and you stay the course on that. Okay? But there is a saying in the Latin language. It was the Romans said this. They said, "Veni, vidi, vici." We came, we saw, we conquered. And that's exactly what they did. They saw our culture because they had none. They saw it. And then they came in and dressed like us and put on our stuff. And they conquered it, right? And then they took it back. They took our culture back with them to their countries. Because they didn't have it. They didn't have a culture. Remember that. Okay. Here's one example. What is that? Quick, quick, quick. What is that?
Obelisk.
An obelisk. Did anybody know what an obelisk is? Phalanx? Yes. Okay. Okay, Junior. That is a long story. He said it is a phallus, but we're not going to go into the phallus story. Oh, no. But anyway, so obelisks were created in 3000 BC or before that, okay? But it is a mythical, it comes from a mythical foundation, okay? It's the story of Asar, Aset, and Horus, okay? But we're not going to go there, because that's another whole speech. But anyway, these obelisks are all over the world. Does anybody know exactly where that one is? Washington, D.C. And it's ours. These obelisks were created by the ancient Kemetans, the ancient Egyptians, okay? And every time they built a temple to their gods, they put an obelisk in the front of the temple with a description of the god and why they were worshiping them, and it was like a tribute to the god. And these obelisks are ours. They're ours. The Romans didn't come up with it, the Greeks didn't come up with it, the Persians didn't come up with it, the Babylonians didn't come up with it, the Mesopotamians didn't come up with it. It was black Africans that made this. And they're all over the world. So when you see them in landmarks, when you see them in parks, when you see them in the Washington, D.C. area, when you see them in Paris, when you see them in Rome, when you see them in Florence, all over the world, they've taken our creativity without giving us credit for it. So every time you see an obelisk, you can say, that's my stuff. Because it is. Okay? So, we can admire it, all that kind of stuff, and we can talk with them about what great contributions, you know, they've given the world, but we know who it really belongs to, and it's ours. So, what are these? Now, these were built in Africa more than 3,000 years ago. You notice how most of them look like they're in like an old setting? There's a lot of dirt around them, dirt on the ground and stuff. So this is revisionist history. When you see these things and we're not given credit for it, they're taking it as their own. They're revising the history. They're in the dominant position. We don't have no credit. We don't get no credit. Okay? So now when you see them, you will have to take credit for it. Okay? Now, another thing that we have to understand is colonization. When the missionaries and the colonists came to Africa, they had to save the heathens from themselves. Yes. When they were actually the heathens, when they were actually the barbarians, when they were actually the cavemen, when they were actually the people out of control, okay, but they were coming to Africa for a different reason. They were coming to look for the Silk Road. They were coming from Europe to fill their coffers back with gold and silver, diamond, silk, and all that stuff from the Orient. They were looking for a short route to the Orient, and they ran into Mother Africa. So the actual reasons why they came were very different than what they first said. Okay? It's always like that. Okay, and when you say, why is Africa so poor? Why is Africa so poor? Follow me with this. During the 1700s and 1800s, when the European Caucasoids discovered Africa, and all the minerals and all the valuables and stuff that were contained in the continent, they sliced and diced it up. England, Germany, France, Spain, Portugal, Italy, all those countries took chunks of Africa for themselves. And another real shrewd thing that they did, which was really underhanded, was that they attached the mineral rights under the ground legally to their countries. So they have a direct connection with the revenue from those minerals going back to their countries in Europe. So they totally bypassed the black African. You know, you're down there, you know, digging up the diamonds and getting a quarter a day or whatever, and all the real revenue is going back to the Beers. All the real revenue is going back to the gold people. You know, the titanium, the strontium, all those things that are contained on the motherland. That's right.
That was the Berlin Conference, right?
Yeah.
Big
It was
divide.
like in 1850 or something like that.
All Europeans.
Okay, now this, I know some of you know the history of Africa and the geography, but there are 54 countries on the African continent. Okay, 54 countries, and that is including Madagascar, which is the island to the far right. Okay, now you'll notice that there's that bouncing baby oil down here. These are all the riches that are in Africa, and there are so many more. But I just didn't want to weigh you down with all of them. But these are the big, the heavy hitters: the oil, the diamonds, the gold, the salt, the tropical fruits, the salt, cocoa beans and rubber. Okay, all the European countries have, how do we say, attached themselves to these minerals. And that's where they get their revenue. That's why they're so rich, and they've built their countries up, and they have all these gold palaces and all this type of stuff, but they got that off of our continent. Okay? It is also a reason why we're taught to hate Africa. Why would you want a people to associate themselves with a continent like this? That's the last thing on earth you want them to associate with, is with a great continent with minerals 60 feet deep in the ground or lower. So
so that they won't get the fight when it comes to trying to keep it.
Exactly. Because they don't want you to be proud and claim Africa as your own, and you guys got to get the hell out. You know, this is our stuff. What are you doing here? You know, they don't want the power to be to get emboldened and empowered, you know, and take their country back. They want us to hate Africa. They don't want us to associate with Africans. You know, they teach us to hate our own people. And that's self-hatred. That's self-hatred. So when you see people, you know, and this is no disparity, and we must get this. When you see people with long flowing hair and contact lenses that are blue and bleaching their skin, this is like the epitome of self-hatred. We don't come like that. Off the continent, we don't come like that. That's foreign. That's foreign as night is from day. But they've taught us to hate who we really are and assimilate who they are. And they're trying to be like us. It's crazy, but you know, everything we do, here they come. Here they come. They be in, what do they call it, those tanning salons? Oh yeah. But oh yeah, you guys are just too black.
Oh no, they have the spray now. They have the chocolate spray now.
Oh, chocolate spray. It's really deep. It's really deep. It's really deep. So why is there so much unrest? Now you guys got this already, right? So the top 8 oil-producing countries in Africa have violence and armed conflict at all times. You hear about it, you read about it in the news. Now, Nigeria, Algeria, Angola, Egypt, Libya, Sudan, Republic of Congo, Equatorial Guinea. Now, for as long as we know, these foreign powers have been gobbling up these countries. And the most important mineral that they're trying to attach to is what? Oil. Oil. It's always oil. So, but wait, you say Egypt and Libya and Sudan are African countries? Isn't that in the Middle East? Has anybody heard of the Middle East? The Middle East, where's the Middle East? Okay, there is no Middle East, okay? We've been duped because they've termed things different. They've just named things different like they do. Because they don't want to be convicted by the world, you know, stealing people's stuff from Africa, so they just call it the Middle East. And it just encompasses all those countries too. Oh, by the way, oh yeah, they're the 8 top producing oil countries. Okay.
And they change the maps around, so you don't.
Oh yeah, yeah they do. They do change the maps around. So, and the European Caucasoids want control of the oil. Okay. Now I'm going to tell you something, and you can follow this. Follow me. Follow me. Okay. You remember Muammar Gaddafi and Saddam Hussein? And you remember at one time Muammar Gaddafi and Saddam Hussein were doing business with the United States.
Yes.
They were sending their oil, and the United States was sending their grain and corn. Everything was homeostatic. Everything was cool. But then all of a sudden, Muammar Gaddafi got this great idea. Oh, well, we're going to start the United Bank of Africa. Uh-oh.
Independence.
Uh-oh. You mean to tell me you're going to break away from us and establish one currency on the whole continent? He knew they were cutting people's arms and hands off. They knew that. They knew Hitler was doing all the stuff that he did. But, you know, it wasn't our problem. That's their problem. But see, when you start talking about breaking away and doing your own thing with the money, that's a deal breaker. That's a deal breaker. So just remember, that's at the crux of it. So now that you perhaps have a different perspective on Africa as your motherland, as our motherland, it's time to learn some more facts about Africa. Now, the earliest times in African history, some of you may know this, some of you may not. You remember a time, okay, have you ever read about the time of the Pangea?
Yeah.
Okay, the Pangea was when all the continents, all the land masses of Africa were one. This was millions of years ago, okay, millions of years ago. But all the continents of the world were at one time one land mass. And because of tectonic plates, earthquakes, you know, glacial periods, which there were 4 great glacial periods, the land masses split apart. Have you ever looked at South America and looked at Africa, how they kind of fit together? At one time they actually did. This was like 300 million years ago, you know, before anybody was around, but this is what the geologists have said, okay? So this is really, really good, okay? Really, really good to know. So the Earth is approximately 4 million years old, and the oldest fossils that have been found of modern man, Homo sapiens sapiens, us, have been found in Central Eastern Africa. Now, as much as the European Caucasoid wants us to think and believe that white men were the first people on earth, that is not even physically possible. Now, you're talking about white people in the middle of the desert, in the sun, no shade, white in snow, and they're out there just sun. No. The first man came from Africa. He was African, he was black. He was black. So the first people on earth, the first Homo sapiens sapien, modern men, were black Africans. Okay? So don't let anybody ever tell you anything else. The evidence is all there. And the deeper they dig right now, the blacker the planet gets. They can't escape it. They want to find themselves so bad, but they can't find themselves.
No.
And where do they dig when they want to get ancient stuff? They don't go to Germany. They don't want to go to Netherlands, Belgium. They don't go there. They go to Africa, right? Because we were the first, right? Okay. So it's the cradle of civilization and the birthplace of all mankind. And your little Caucasoid European brothers are your cousins. Okay. Okay, so anyway, all this development took a long, long time. The Reese's monkey. Okay. Now I don't want you to trip about this. I don't want you to trip about this. Now, what this is really depicting is different stages over millions of years of how we became, how we came to be Homo sapiens, human beings. Okay. You've heard of Homo erectus. Okay. He was the one that left Africa and went up into the northern hemisphere and spread out all over the place, okay? And then there was the Neanderthals, the Cro-Magnons, and then the Homo sapiens like we are now. Okay, we're little short black men. Okay. So the next slide I'm going to show you, this is going to be sort of like a visual. I want you to hang with me, okay? Now, we often wonder why European Caucasoids behave the way they do.
They mad.
Well, yeah, they're aggressive and they're individualistic. They're very aggressive and they're very individualistic. But thousands of years ago, two groups existed. And I'm going to break it down into an Iceman experience and a Sunman experience. Okay? So, with the Icemen, their experience was, I'm cold every day. I'm freezing every day. Bone-chilling cold, right? I'm hungry, out in the cold every day to find food. Try to get something. And the babies are hungry, the women are crying, ain't got enough food, the babies ain't got enough to eat, right? And also, there's always clouds. There was no sun in the northern hemisphere when they found themselves up there. And they had to go outside the caves to kill more animals, to get more skins, and to get more furs. So they had to take up arms every day. They were, how would we say, guarding their families from other people, trying to steal their women, steal their food. It was like a dog-eat-dog kind of an existence. And it was cold all the time. There was no sun to bathe them and make them feel good. There was no warm fuzzies for them. And they lived in caves. Okay, during the last ice age, okay, I just want you to show you this. During the last ice age, which was 75,000 years before Christ, 75,000 years before Christ was the last of the four great ice ages. When Homo erectus went up into the northern hemisphere, he got stuck behind the last glacial ice age. And they stayed there for 65,000 years behind all that ice. They could not get out. The oceans were frozen, the mountains were frozen 6 miles high. They were stuck in those caves for generations upon generations. And that kind of makes you a little bit on the aggravated side. It makes you kind of mean, when nothing is ever nice and you can't get enough to eat and you can't find a soft place to lay your head. It gives you a little bit of an aggression. So this is where you may have come up with those types of sayings about survival of the fittest, only the strong survive, kill or be killed. What's the other one? Might makes right. Whoever has got the biggest club wins. Okay? And that's pretty much how they roll. They're individualistic, aggressive, and they don't care.
And that's why they're serial killers.
That's true. That's true, Ray.
Sorry, they got the kids to get that.
Yeah. And you know, this may give you a little insight as to how they can drop atom bombs on civilian populations and just walk away and say, okay, we won.
Right.
This is Nagasaki, Hiroshima. Okay? They
Now they
dropped
got
it.
the drones.
Well, you have the drones, they're just killing people with machines. You know, it's the same thing with Hitler. How he could just, you know, kill Jews and African blacks in their concentration camps and just, you know, just like, they're just different.
But he was half Jew.
Well, he may not know.
Yeah.
But, you know, he was a little bit different. But, you know, he has another cousin that's coming of power in the United States, but I won't go there. Okay, the experience of the sun people was very different, right? The warm sun and warm breeze on my face all the time. Water from the river cools my thirst and grows my food. My family is all around me, protecting and loving me. It takes a village to raise a child, right? Because we are a communal, relationship-based people, okay? We had the nighttime sky as our blankets and the stars as our night light. We had green grass to lay our heads on and have sweet sleep. We had rivers, we had abundant food growing out of the ground, dropping off the trees, right? And we had the stars to entertain us. That's why we were the greatest astronomers ever. Okay, so the modern day mentality of people like that is I am one with the earth, I am one with my ancestors. And we're very spiritual people. We do believe in ancestor worship. We pray and lift up our ancestors all the time. We remember auntie, uncle, granny, all that. Yeah. But when you think about how the difference is, think about that. Okay, just think about that. Okay? All right. So after the Ice Age, the people in the northern part of the country lived in caves, as we said. And they started to look like this. And they're not black Africans. They're our cousins. And they kind of look like us. They got a big nose and thick lips. But what changed? What changed? His skin got lighter. He's not black African, but he's from Africans. But his skin got lighter because there's no sun to reinforce the melanin to reproduce itself and get dark. So he lost his tan, basically. And when we go to the Bahamas, we get what? Black. We get black. And then when we come back home to North America, we get lighter. So when he went to the northern hemisphere where there's hardly any sun, he lost it all. And the people who couldn't lose their melanin, they died by the hundreds of thousands. They died by the hundreds of thousands. So that's how they came to, over generations, be white. And I threw in this cartoon. It wasn't like Barney and Betty. It wasn't like Fred and Wilma. It wasn't like Pebbles. You know, they weren't bringing in brontosaurus steaks and living high on the hog and all that. And you know, Fred didn't have a job. You know, they didn't have a nice little cozy little cave. It wasn't like that. It was a different animal, okay? So this is revisionist history right in front of us. They're revising what the real deal was and making it a cartoon, like it's funny. It wasn't funny. It was worse than miserable, okay? But they have control of what? The media, right? They have control of the media. Okay, so we document the human story by looking at fossils. We look at DNA. Everybody knows what that is. By the artifacts that are found in the ground and the things that they use to store food. And we also look at the linguistics or the languages of people. Now, all of a sudden, we have somebody else that we have to look at, okay? Now, this is somebody you may not have seen before, but this was an artist's rendition of the original African, the black African. This is what they think he looked like, okay? And it kind of shows you sort of like the early ancestors, you know, a little ippy looking. But anyway, this is what they think he looked like, okay? And like I said, he was about 3 or 4 feet tall. And these are hunter-gatherer people gathered along the river, like all settlements early on did. They all settled along the riverbanks. But these people is a family seen on the savannah, which is a large open grassy knoll area in Africa. Now, pre-dynastic period in the African story, in the year 12,000 BC, there were those first settlements along the riverbanks of the Nile River. Everybody familiar with the Nile River?
Yes.
Anybody know how long the Nile River is? Anybody know how long the Nile River is? Okay, is 4,000 miles plus long, which means it is longer than the United States is wide across. Okay, it is the longest river in the world, and it has hundreds of tributaries, which are smaller rivers. Okay, so
Can I add something to that?
yeah,
Second to the Amazon, correct? Amazon is second. But what's unique about it is it runs upwards, north,
Yes.
from south to north.
Yes,
No,
true.
the only other river that does that is the Amazon.
that's true.
So that's always
another-
special.
That's another story too. But, but anyway, so in between 12,000 and 9,000, 10,000 years BC, the ice age starts to melt in Europe, 10,000 BC. And then the cavemen start noticing that the ice is melting. And then they start peeking their ugly little faces out of their caves. And they start seeing what they haven't seen for a long time, which is the sun. And the ice starts to melt. And then they start seeing grass growing and stuff looking good. It's kind of turning around for them. So this happened, 10,000 BC, in between 12,000 and 9,000, when Africans worked with fire and they made their own pottery for use and stuff. So we were this far ahead when the cavemen were coming out of the caves in northern hemisphere, okay? They had no civilization. There were no Greeks and Romans. There were no Persians. It was just us and them coming out of the caves, okay? So at 6,000, that's when the populations that were living near the river started the first language system. It was Swahili. And then in addition to domestication of plants and animals, when people started setting up little cities and towns, and they started becoming more sedentary, agriculture grew, and then they had language. So during this period of time, there was sort of like a bursting forth of cultures mingling together, okay? And then you start getting city-states, okay? And then this was sort of like pre-dynastic ancient Kemet, all right, pre-dynastic ancient Kemet. 3,200 to 3,000 was the age of hieroglyphics, okay? The age of hieroglyphics. Everybody knows that the first language was hieroglyphics. Now there was something called cuneiform that they give the Mesopotamians credit for, but when you look at the map, you realize that the Mesopotamians came into the language at the same time that the Egyptians were coming up with the hieroglyphics. They give the Mesopotamians the credit for the first language, but they got it from the Egyptians. And you have to be straight on with that. And that's why you have to know the history. You have to know where they come along on the timeline, because they'll try to take the credit and they'll try to push you away.
So the hieroglyphic would be the metadata as well, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And then they, you found them on the cave walls and on the tomb text inside tombs for kings and pharaohs. Yeah. So just kind of remember that. And then the language came along 3,400 to 3,200. Everybody knows what a griot is, right? A griot is an ancient storyteller.
The Shaka is a Greek.
Oh, okay. Shaka is a griot.
That's
Okay.
right.
Yes,
Hello
yes,
there.
he is.
How you doing? I bet so. I'll bet you. But these people were highly specialized. They were very skilled and very talented. And they had to be dead on with their stories, because it was serious business if they made a mistake.
Yes.
I mean, people got killed and stuff for not telling the story right, because that was their only history, is their oral story, their oral story. So griots were those people who kept our oral story going for thousands of years until we started to write it down. Okay? Thank you. Okay. Now, these are the river systems of Africa, the first one being the Nile, right? And then they have the Zambezi, and then the Limpopo, then the Orange, and the Congo, the Senegal, and the Niger. Those are the 7 great rivers of the African continent. And I'm going to show you another slide. This one's really good. You put this together. You'll notice that the great empires on the continent of our motherland were all along the same basic areas where the great rivers were. You have the classical Egyptian, you have the Ethiopian, the Monomotapa, the Zulus in the south, the Ashantis, the Ghanaians, the Wolof, the Songhai, and the Mali, okay? And they were all set up along the river systems, and that's the way settlements always form. The next one is pretty simple. That's basically the slice and dice that the European Caucasoids did to our motherland when they divided it up and named it for us. And then we took it back later on, but they kept their mineral rights.
Still paying too.
Yeah, we're still paying, yeah we are. Okay, now this one will blow your mind. This explains everything. The total square miles, I want you to really wrap your mind around this. This is tremendous. The total square miles of the continent of Africa is 11,670,000 square miles in one continent. That's including Madagascar. The United States is 3,120,000 square miles without Alaska and Hawaii. So the United States could fit inside Africa at least 2.5 or 3 times. So when you see maps, sometimes Africa kind of looks the same size as the United States. Wrong. Revisionist history. Again, revisionist history. The United States is peanuts compared to this continent. That's why it's the last virgin earth on the earth. That's why everybody's land grabbing Africa like mad. And that's why we've got to form coalitions to establish trade routes, establishing ourselves with our motherland relatives. Okay? Okay? That's a huge one right there. That's a huge one. Okay, the next one I want you to remember. This is about migratory patterns. Whenever you look at maps that are migratory patterns of human beings, always remember that the root of the tree of migrations all over the world starts here. The roots always start here in the central eastern part of Africa. They always go up and out. Sometimes they go down, but they always start right there. Always. Make a note of that.
Say it again.
Okay. Whenever you look at migratory maps of human beings on the planet, the root of all migrations of people all over the world, they come from Africa. Okay? They go north, they go south, they go east, they go west. But they start here. They start here. Always. The next slide is just the same thing, but a different rendition. You see what I mean? See what I mean? This is why we can say all people in the world come from Africa, and Africa is the birthplace of civilization and all mankind. We were the first. We were the first. That's a great thing. Okay. Africa was a name that was given to us by the Greeks, and then it came to the Romans, and they started calling it Africanus. Initially, our people who lived on the continent, they called it 3 different things. They called it Kush, and they called it Ethiopia. The Atlantic Ocean was actually the Ethiopian Sea, okay? And Herodotus, the father of history, when he documented Eastern Ethiopians in Babylon, he said they were Eastern Ethiopians when he went there. You see what I mean? And he's saying this out of his own mouth. And then the Alkebulan people, the Alkebulanians, okay? These were all names that people called Africa. Now, people who study ancient Kemet and ancient Egypt, we interchange these terms. We sometimes call it Kemet, sometimes we call it Egypt, but it's all the same place in Africa. And kings and pharaohs, the first few dynasties only had kings. And then about the 12th dynasty, they started having pharaohs. And pharaoh means great house or royal palace. Great house or royal palace. Okay? All these pharaohs were black or white. They were black Africans. All the pharaohs were black Africans. Now you know why they don't entertain BC. Now you know why. They don't want to give us credit for anything magnificent. Okay, so you got to know your history like that. Now this is why we study dynasties. Dynasties are just family members who rule from generation to generation to generation. Okay, they just kept it in the family. Okay, and when people didn't have children, you know, they married their sisters or they married their fathers or whatever, just to keep it going. You know what I mean? They did what they had to, right? They did what they had to. Okay. So that was a point that I didn't want to really bring out too much. But anyway, so at this time again, there were no white people around. There were no Greeks and no Romans. And these were supposedly to have been the first people who established the first civilization in history. But there were no Greeks and Romans at this time. So how in the world can they claim to be the first civilizations on Earth? You see? You see how they claim stuff? But you see, if they're not on the timeline right, you can say, no, they weren't. If they weren't on the timeline right. So you have to remember that. The Persians came in first. It actually was the Hyksos, but after they came in, it was the Persians, and then the Greeks, and then the Romans at the turn of the time, when the European Caucasoids inserted themselves. Okay, now this is a long one. I'll just go over this really quickly. The ages of our ancient story in Africa. I'll just go over the gold ones first. The pre-dynastic was the dynasties 1 and 2, which were known for agriculture, pottery, and writing. And then the first golden age was dynasties 3 through 6. And then the second golden age was dynasties 11 through 12. The third one was dynasties 18 through 19. The fourth was the late kingdom of dynasty 25. And the foreign invasions, you know, those crazy barbarians, those heathens, those Bulgars, those Vandals, those crazy people, those cavemen. Okay. They reached northern Africa, and it was over for our ancient Kemetic relatives. Okay? That's when they reached it. So just remember, we were great, and then we didn't have strong defenses, and that's the best offense, right?
Yes.
Strong defense is the best offense.
Yes.
And they had no natural enemies. So they kind of lost out. Okay, the pyramids, okay, this is a picture of the pyramids. And some people have the nerve to say that, oh, they built the big ones, and then they kind of ran out of rocks to build any more big ones, so they built 3 small ones. That's what they said. You know, it's like, what in the world? But anyway, because these were built without machines, they were not built with cranes. They were built by human beings with hands and with the sweat of their backs, all working together to produce one huge deal, one huge thing. And it just goes to show you what we are capable of if our minds are right, if we have our minds right. And what we have to remember is now we are absolutely, I think we are just assaulted with distractions. On every hand, every time we turn our heads, we're assaulted with distractions. And if we can get rid of the distractions, prioritize things in our life, we're capable of doing great things. We really are. We really are. Without a lot of help. Without a lot of help. Yeah. Okay. Now for the young people in the audience, who are still awake, okay, this is what the Great Sphinx of Giza looked like when it was finished. It has a nose, and it has lips that are intact. You notice that? Looks pretty cool, right? Now, the one on the right is the way that it appears to us in our history books, in his storybooks, right? The nose is knocked off and the lips are knocked off. That is a tip. That's the tip. If you ever see a sculpture, any grand thing that's made out of stone or wood, and the nose is mutilated, or the lips are mutilated, they're black Africans. Always remember that. Because they want to disconnect us from any great achievements. And that's how they do it, because we're very featured uniquely. Our features are broad noses and thick lips. And when you see that they've tried to knock it off, they don't want us to know who we are. That's a dead giveaway. Yeah.
Is that true?
I was told when I learned about this last year during history that the Europeans came and they ruined the sculptures as a sign of hatred towards the Egyptian culture.
And as I said before, they envy us. They envy us. They hate us. They spitefully use us. And they steal what we have, because we have a creative energy which is called melanin that they don't have. That's the bottom line. And when I see you, and you do spoken word, and I see Julius, and I see you, and I see Shaka, and I see this brilliance coming out of our brains on foot, ad lib. I could shout it from the rooftops, okay? I could shout it from the rooftops. Don't ever say that you are not capable of great things, because you are. And they will do anything to keep you from knowing that. Anyway,
Ms. Bush?
yeah,
I would like to say that the mere fact that we're still here after
Yes.
all that we've been through
Yes.
speaks to who we are.
Yes,
true.
yes.
yes, it's true.
Because it's never been easy from the beginning after,
Oh, no.
you know, so
Oh,
the
no.
mere fact that we're still here and
Still
our
here.
history has been erased speaks to who we are.
Oh, it's true. It's true. Now, the next one is a little busy. The next one and the next one. This is just a graphic of all the dynasties of ancient kingdom. Okay, it starts at the 0 dynasty, the 1st through the 3rd, the 4th through the, and go on. And there are different names that are associated with these. Now, when you look at the dynasties, remember that there were some great pharaohs and some not so good. There were some strong pharaohs and they were corrupt pharaohs. Because they were human beings. Not all of them were so all of that in a bag of chips. But, they had the, the authority to be great. Some of them used that. Other people didn't use it, like we do sometimes in modern times. So, at the end of the dynasties, here we have the Persians. And the Persians here, and then the Greeks, and then the Romans. And Cleopatra, who wasn't Egyptian, she was the last queen. The last queen. But
This is
she
the same.
well, that's true. Now, okay, so we're going to go through this kind of quick, and these are all black Africans. This is Narmer, who was the first king of the first dynasty. Notice his nose and notice his lips. This is not a ruler or a pharaoh or a king, but he was one of the greatest men of ancient kingdom, and he was Imhotep. He was the man who knew all the problems and had all the answers. He was the first multi-genius. He was the first great mathematician, brain surgeon. He wrote the first medical encyclopedia that Hippocrates stole. The Hippocratic Oath that the Greeks say, okay, if you're going to be a doctor, you have to take the Hippocratic Oath. But they got the information from Imhotep. Okay, that's where he got the information. Okay, and he was always the first. He was a great physician, scientist, builder, and astronomer. Yeah, he was great man, super. Yeah.
Yet also, the Romans worshipped him as the Christ. He was worshipped in Rome as the Christ, meaning anointed one.
Yeah.
Because he was so great. I know. Okay, and this guy, I just love the way he looked. He has on a cat, a K-H-A-T, and I think that's where we get the word hat. But it was a pharaonic, it was a sphinx-like kind of a thing with the big ears and the cap that kind of went down on the sides and in the back. He was Amenhotep III. And this guy was Amenhotep III. He was a grandfather of King Tut, okay? And he was just a great builder. All these black people, okay, Queen had hated, she was hated by many people. And many of the pharaohs subsequent to her, they tried to erase her name from all the obelisks and everything because they hated her so much. But she was a woman that was on a mission. She did a whole lot.
Yes.
She did a whole lot. She was very accomplished. So Hatshepsut, she was the real deal. Okay, Amenhotep. Oh, this is very interesting. Okay, follow me here. Follow me. Amenhotep, who was also called Akhenaten. This is his little wife, Nefertiti. She was a Persian slave who worked her way up, if you get my name. But anyway, he was the one who changed the spiritual system of Egypt. He became a monotheistic. He was a monotheistic pharaoh. He worshipped one God. It was interesting that Moses was existent during his reign. Moses, okay? There was no real Moses back in those days. It was Moses, okay? And he was the king that basically said, okay, we're going to just throw out all those gods and stuff. I'm going to build my own city in Amarna, and we're going to live in peace and quiet, and I'm just going to love my wife and have a lot of kids and forget you guys. So during his reign, the borders of Egypt and the borders of ancient Kemet fell to ruin. The armies fell to pieces, the borders fell to pieces, commerce fell to pieces. He was all about, family. He was all about family. But anyway, Moses, remember, that Moses, lived during the time of this monotheistic pharaoh. Remember that. I'll tie it in together, and I'll tie it in together. Hold tight. Okay. And this was King Tut. Everybody knows King Tut and his gold coffin, right? And he was known more in death than he was ever known in life. He took the pharaohship at 9 years old. He got married to his half-sister when he was 12 and 13 years old. He had children, but they did not survive. And his tomb in 1922 was the only tomb that was found intact. That's why they found the gold and the silver and all the stuff around him. He had a lot of physical abnormalities. He walked with a cane, and he had a bone disease, which permitted, how you say it, made it very difficult for him to turn his neck. So he was kind of like a weak kind of a king, physically weak. Okay, here we have Ramses the Great. Anybody heard of Ramses the Great? Yes. He was a bad motor scooter. Okay, he was everything. He was a diplomat. He was a military guy, a warrior. He was a builder. He had 200 concubines and more than 100 kids. So he was really busy. And yeah, he was dead. But he was a busy guy. And if you ever want to really see a very well-accomplished king or pharaoh, Ramses II was it. And he was in the 19th dynasty. He was great. And in that picture, you see Abu Simbel. That's a very iconic picture on the bottom right corner. Very iconic picture. It's known all over the world. And he built many temples like that. This one is at Luxor. But he was something else. And this guy was the last pharaoh. His name was Samentek. And he was in the 26th dynasty. All African black, pharaoh. This was a picture of the first court. This was a court of justice. This is a mythical display of what a court of justice would be like. How many people up there? 12. Is this the scales of justice? And this is going to be tied in later. This is a feather, the feather of Ma'at. And Ma'at is always depicted with a headband with a feather. And she's usually close to or holding on to an ankh. Okay? But at any rate, they stole the court of justice from ancient Kemetans. That's where they got it. And Ma'at was the mythical goddess of truth, balance, reciprocity, fairness, justice, all that. She was the one that, you had to line up on her stuff, or you were just wrong. And Ma'at is also associated with, some of you have this, the 42 admonitions of Ma'at, or the 42 negative confessions of Ma'at. Okay? And there were 42 of these rules and regulations that the ancient Kemetans self-ruled and regulated themselves by. It said, I shall not. I will not. It didn't say thou shalt not. It said I will not. Okay? So it was a personal thing with them. Nobody was making them do right. They made themselves do right because they had someone that they had to stand up to. And these are Shapti dolls. This would be a very interesting little research project for somebody. Shapti dolls were sort of like insurance in the afterlife that you would make it into the afterlife. Like if you lived a bad life and stuff, the Amun priesthood would make these dolls for you, and then they would tell people, we're going to put a spell on them. And then when they bury you with these Shapti dolls, they're going to work off your bad habits, and you're going to make it to the afterlife. So the Amun priesthood made a fortune selling these dolls. Yeah. In the 18th dynasty, then you may have found one or two in a tomb, and by the 24th or 25th, you would find one for every day of the year. Oh my goodness. Yeah, so it was a real moneymaker for the Amun priesthood. It was a really good one. But, okay, the next one, anybody recognize her? I know you do. Okay, she was the mythical god Ma'at, okay? And in her hand, you'll notice an ankh, which is the symbol of life or the breath of life. And on the far right, you'll see what is a crucifix, which was the icon of the Judeo-Christian church that they stole from us also. The ankh and the crucifix, the ankh and the cross, are depicted on the tomb text and in the hieroglyphics of ancient Kemet. So they have used the cross, but they've left the ankh because they can make the cross what they want. The ankh is definitely ours. They can't make that anything else. So The guy in the upper right-hand corner is Senusret II. He was from the 12th dynasty, and he's holding 2 ankhs over his lungs, which are the signs of life or the breath of life. So that was a very good sign, right? Okay. The next one is a collage of what Ma'at is associated with. And she's associated with what? The feathers. The feathers. Whenever you see the feathered woman like this or the feathered woman like this, whatever way she stands, that's Ma'at. Okay? And you will also notice, what does she look like? What does she look like? She looks like an angel. With the feathers, she looks like an angel. So they got the angel from us too. The angel was ours originally. Okay, so the cross and the variations of the cross that they've embellished over the years is still a cross, and it's still ours. This is first dynasty wall carving of Narmer, slewing his enemies. These are just regular folk. These are African black people. You notice the thickness of the hair. You notice the braids or the twists, okay? And you'll notice their noses and their mouths. Notice their noses and their mouths. Their noses and their mouths have been mutilated. They're black Africans. So when you see that, it took a person a long time to do that hair stuff. Okay? It took the sculptor a long time to do that. But whenever you see the nose and the mouth mutilated, they're black Africans. And this is just an Egyptian couple in loving embrace. Women always had their hands on their husbands. And you'll notice in this picture that an artist has total command of many colors. It's not like he's restricted to black and white. He's using a lot of different colors. So if they were green, he would have colored them green. But they weren't green. They were black Africans. Okay? Just regular folk. And this is a princess of Amarna, okay, during the 19th dynasty with Akhenaten. And this is a pharaoh hunting geese or goose or whatever he's doing. And these are highly revered scribes of the court who took down everything and were one of few who knew how to read and write. And Kemetan sailors on a barge, they were black. Kemetan face with a nose and mouth intact, you notice? Big nose, thicker lips, right? Okay, and this is just a family unit of Kemet. Okay, now here we have, what came first? What came first? The obelisk on the left or the obelisks on the right? Obelisk on the left. Now, what came first? The 42 declarations of innocence or the 10 commandments?
The 42 declarations.
Okay, now, we're not going to read all 42, okay, because it's long, but we'll just read number 4 on the left. It says, I have not committed theft, which corresponds to number 8 on the right, which says, thou shalt not steal. Okay, number 5 says, I have not murdered man or woman. Number 6 says, thou shalt not kill. On number 19, it says, I have not committed adultery. On the right, number 7, it says, thou shalt not commit adultery. On number 38, it says, I have not cursed God. And that corresponds to number 3, thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. Okay, so I'm going to stand right in front of you right now and say, the 10 commandments came from the 42 declarations of innocence or the 42 negative confessions of Ma'at. Period. Period. There's no debating that. No debating. Okay? 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 Okay, so you guys collaborate with the people who have those issues. Okay. All right. So the scales of Ma'at came first or the scales of justice, Lady Justice came first? Okay, Ma'at came first, right? Okay. What is still in use? The ankh or the cross?
Both.
Well, we use the ankh.
The cross.
The cross, okay? The one at the cross is still in use, right? Okay. Now, now the crown on the pharaoh, this is the mythical couple. This is Asar, Aset, and Harut, or Isis, Osiris, or Horus, okay? Now, you'll notice that he has this crown on his head, right?
Yeah.
But you'll notice that these white guys have the same semblance of the same kind of shape, right? So, which came first?
Ours. I mean, the crown of Pharaoh.
Yeah. Our miters came first. These miters came last. Okay? So when they get together and they're doing all their little Pope elections and all that kind of stuff, they wear all those little mitres, okay? All right?
They had no spiritual system at all.
No, they didn't. They didn't.
They plagiarized
Oh.
everything we had.
And then I'm going to lay waste to you. I'm going to say that this is Joseph, this is Mary, and this is Jesus.
Yep.
This is the template. This is the blueprint for Joseph, Mary, and Jesus.
That's it.
Period. Period. Just think about it. Just think about it. Okay, just think about it. Okay, which came first? The image of the feathered ma'at or the image of the angel? They stole that too. Okay, here we go. Okay, now, the images of the Black Madonna are all over Europe. In every major country of Europe right now, there's a Black Madonna and child in some cathedral, some church, some religious building, some little grotto somewhere, and they're, yes.
It's in the Vatican.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, oh, yes, oh, yes. And it's in the Vatican in Italy. Also, you will see her like this. This was the original, remember? Aset and Horus. This is the template for the Black Madonna and child. Was Aset and Horus,
Right,
okay? Or Isis and Horus,
right.
okay? So, when you see these, and then when you see these, this is revisionist history. They revised it to put them on top and to keep us behind. But in Europe, you see this all over the place. But not in America. Not in America. So you have to go a little ways out of your way to see the Black Madonna.
Color don't make no difference.
Huh? Color don't make no difference? Okay.
Told you that.
Okay. 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 So,
It doesn't matter.
okay.
if it's black or white.
Now, okay, so these are imposters. Okay, remember how I told you that they tried to give credit for civilization to the Babylonians, the Sumerians, Mesopotamians, and all that? This is a picture of a real woman of Sumeria. You notice that they tried to chip her nose off? Anytime you see that they're messing with the nose and the lips. Really?
That's what they taught me. Listen, hey,
Really? This is a picture of the sculpture, the bust of the real Cleopatra. You notice her nose? It might be hard to see, but they messed with her nose. They tried to take her nose away. And you notice her hair is thicker? Okay, this was the real Cleopatra. This is the European Caucasoid version of Cleopatra. And we have to recognize this so tough. So tough we have to recognize it. Yeah. So, is it any wonder that we don't know how great we are? It is no wonder. It is no wonder. Now this gentleman here is a descendant of those cavemen. He's a descendant of those barbarians from the north that invaded Kemet. He's a descendant, maybe, thousands of descendants ago. But anyway, the only reason why he's standing there with one of our scribes is because it's a moneymaker for them. Anytime that they go into those tombs and they discover intact tombs and they discover gold coffins and anything like that, oh, they get the credit for that. That goes to their museums. And they hold Tut. King Tut's coffin is in Egypt. Anytime he makes the world tour and goes around the world, they get paid for that. We don't get paid for it. They get paid for it. So the Egyptians of today are not the Egyptians of when we were in power.
No. But you know what? My mother took my daughter to the King Tut thing,
Yeah.
and she noticed that the gold was like painted, so she didn't say nothing, but she was like, so when she got home, she said,
Yeah.
that wasn't the real deal, but they made it look like it because they took the real stuff
Oh.
and was just traveling around the world and playing it.
Oh, yeah.
That's a knockoff.
Not all her. Exactly.
Okay, now this guy, his name is Zawi Hawass, and he's an archaeologist and Egyptologist, and he's been over the Egyptian antiquities for more than 30 years. He's also an ancestor of those heathens that invaded ancient Egypt and northern Africa, those northern cavemen and heathens. Okay, but if you do this and you discover a step down or something, you gotta call him. Anytime you open a tomb, he's there. Anytime you go to PBS or the National Geographic or anywhere that has anything of a historical value for ancient Kemet, he's all over.
What's his name?
Zawi Hawass.
He be on PBS.
Zawi Hawass. Yeah, he's the current devil at the Egypt's gate. Okay, now, without any ado, and once and for all, one of the greatest misconceptions of all, Jesus the Christ, he was born between 7 to 4 BC, and he died approximately 26 AD. Now, it says in Daniel 10:6, it says this. It says, and his arms and feet like in color to polished brass. And someplace in the book it says something about his hair being like lamb's wool. Does this look like a person who has polished brass feet or arms or has hair like lamb's wool? Okay. Misrepresentation, okay, and revisionist history. Inserting themselves on the timeline, AD 1. And that's when they took off. With this representation of them. Period. Okay, next. Next. Okay. So basically, Egypt, I would say, ancient Kemet fell victim to their own trusting natures. They did not have a strong defense. And they evidently fell because they had no offense. Okay. They had no natural enemies. They did have a standing army, but they did not know the scourge that was descending upon them until it was way too late. And they lost. And there have been falls of Rome, there's been falls of Greece and everything. Every civilization falls. But, you always wonder, how in the world did it get that bad? What happened? So, and they were too welcoming and trusting, and, they just had too many riches, which they still do. This is why they're being victimized by all the countries outside their borders. It's because they're rich in everything. That's why we need to embrace them. Get with them. Get with them. Real tight. Yeah. So the invasions that destroyed them were the Hyksos, the Persians, the Greeks, the Romans, the Vandals, and the Arabs. And we've been, how would we say, twice enslaved. European slavery in the 1500s and colonization in the 1884 to the present. You see, this is another screaming testimony to the fact that we have to embrace who we are. We have to understand and read and know who we are. We cannot be anything else but who we are. We can't be anything else. We have to be true to who we are. Yeah. We just didn't know how great we were. So, how can we progress? We can study the Grand Master teachers. We can study Dr. Asa G. Hilliard III, Sheikh Anta Diop, Dr. Ron Karinga, who established Kwanzaa, and so many others, heroes and sheroes of our current and past generations. We have to read their books. And there are YouTube videos of these people and other intellectuals who have written about our story for all of their adult lives. So we have to read. We have to read. And I'm almost done. We're almost done. We can also tell our children our real story and not the history that they see in schools. We can help others, like our teachers, our families, and our friends, to understand the real story of who we really are and what our real story is. And we can also read, children. Read. And more importantly, we can allow our creative energy and genius to shine through. Because it is within our genes that we hold the greatness of our past. Remember that. Now that you've seen some things, you have to also learn to question everything you see on the TV, in movies, in the media, anything that you hear on the radio, in music, things like that. You have to have your filter exquisitely sharpened to understanding where the revisionist history is being played on you. You don't want to be played anymore. No more playing, okay? And you certainly don't get news from PBS or National Geographic or Wikipedia, right? So you have to also analyze why you believe what you believe around Africa. Is it that you learned it, or that you really have a personal vendetta against Africa for some unknown reason? you know? We can't help with who we are. We can't change that. So, you know, you can kind of help to kind of justify your feelings and get it straight, you know, now that you kind of know some truths about it. Yeah. Okay. Now, to sum this up, I just want to just kind of embolden you a little bit. The contributions of ancient Kemet and Africa are immense, okay? They're magnificent and they're significant to the entire world. It seems as though we're the only people who don't know it. It seems like we're the only people who don't know it. So we have to correct that, okay? We were the first men. We established the first civilization on the earth. And that is something to be proud of. Those facts you don't negate. Those facts you don't ignore. And those facts you don't resist. You embrace that. We are stronger together than we are separately. This gathering is a perfect example of this. We are so much stronger and so much truer to our spiritual nature together than we ever were separately. So I would just say that you should not forget or minimize the information that I've given you, but I hope that it will serve as an incentive for you to read more, learn more, share it with your family and your friends, people who are in the process of becoming more African conscious. Be proud of who we are. And just continue the legacy of what all of our, how would we say, ancient heroes and sheroes have already started, the books that they've written. And just never forget who you came from. You come from a great people, a great people. And what you're doing here with the African marketplace, it's almost like, it's like a dream come true. Mm-hmm. It's like we're returning to who we really are. Mm-hmm. So now you understand the timeline and our own story. Now you understand the timeline and our own story. Embrace it, take it, run with it, and be proud of it.